Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the very first Strivecast, your podcast as it relates to health, wellness, and sport training. I'm excited to introduce to you our first guest, a gentleman by the name of James Roberts. He's a Paralympic athlete who participated in actually two Paralympic Games. Has a lot of insight as it relates to sport and sport training and his experiences being a Paralympic athlete. Look forward to having you guys take a look. Please leave comments on our Facebook page at strivefitness.ca and feel free to input any ideas that you have as it relates to future podcasts. We'll talk to you later and enjoy the Strivecast. So, first of all, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to meet and discuss a couple of different things as it relates to health and wellness and sport training and some of your experiences out there. And I have a ton of questions to ask you about some of your background, some of your experiences, and that sort of thing. And I'm looking forward to getting your take on everything from sport training to training with disabilities and some of the experiences that you've gone through your life. So first of all, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Anton.
So tell me a little bit about your story. I understand that you've dealt with some of the things that you've been dealing with disability-wise all your life, and so that being said, tell me about some of the things and some of the challenges that you've gone through as an athlete and as a coach.
I think in terms of an athlete, I've not really looked at disability as being really a disadvantage because everybody's in that predicament anyway. And for my story, when a long story straight, I started in able-bodied sport to start with, so it was it would be. I never knew. I obviously knew that Paralympic sport existed, be it on the television, but I never knew that avenue was kind of open towards me, and I maybe possibly looked down on it because obviously Olympic sport is very much in the media at that time, be it only even in the early 2000s. But it was one of my coaches, it would have been back in 2002, said, why don't you give disability a sport a chance? But I think because I would have been about 15 or 16, I probably was in that phase where you are very, you want to go against authority anyway. Mm-hmm. So it was very much that. So it kind of, I think on reflection and how I look at it now, it opened obviously a massive avenue for where I've gone on in life. And kind of answer your question, Anton, in terms of coaching, I think I won't generalize and say I've got more of an empathy over, say, another coach like yourself, but maybe because I've been in and around different disabilities, I can kind of see, well, this is how, say, somebody with spinal injuries has coped with their disability at an elite level. I can kind of relate and say, if I do have a client that has a similar disability, okay, they may not be able to do everything that athlete has done, but that is kind of probably their ceiling, so to speak, in terms of their training. And kind of looking at it from if you look at it for, say, maybe an amputee, I'm probably maybe more on their wavelength because I can I've got to adapt to certain aspects of training anyway, and I've had to do it, as you said earlier in the episode, I've had to overcome probably certain aspects throughout my life. So I've always been used to having to adapt things, be it, or if I use the early analogy as a kid, just to get on the monkey bars and be able to play with my peers, and that's in elementary school.
Yeah. So it's something that's always been. You never saw it as a disability, but it's always something that you'd have had to adapt to anyways. So with that, do you see, and I don't want to limit this to just disability because you work with able-bodied individuals or individuals that are less affected. But that being said, what are some of the challenges that you see with both populations? Because for me, I've had clientele who have competed at the Paralympic level, as well as individuals that are not so athletically inclined, and I see a certain level of drive in all individuals, whether they're dealing with something or not. What is some of the biggest challenges that you see with some of your clientele that have had to overcome some additional challenges versus your more able-bodied clientele?
I think if you generalize it to maybe say the disability community, okay, it's the challenges of having to overcome, say, maybe even access to the gym floor, because and this is probably a gripe with most even elite level athletes. Gyms will say they're accessible, but all they mean is to get in the front door. And I think, and I've even opened the eyes of, say, the sales department, say, well, okay, this gym says it's accessible, but that stops in, say, the lobby, and that's it. It's not. I don't think they take on board. I think the larger corporate gyms, yes, they're going to be more expansive and open. So that one, I think, is maybe an upsell. But in terms of how the member is going to be able to use the equipment, I think, because I had a client and they said to him, they can use the cables, the dumbbells, and that's about it. But then I kind of flipped it on its head and say to him, well, shouldn't you maybe question and say, well, I probably worked it out off the top of my head. I think there's probably about maybe half, if not a quarter of the equipment he couldn't use. So couldn't you use that maybe as a bargaining tool and say, well, hey, this amount of equipment I can't use and never will be able to use as a wheelchair user. Yeah. Can you not maybe give me a little bit of a discount? And I probably say, even to say maybe your listeners that listen to your show, maybe have the balls to say that to the thing and see what their response is going to be. Because, okay, we do live in a PC world. They're not going to say, well, hey, hang on there. You can't go and say that. But you kind of do have, and we'll use this analogy now, I like to stand on, because if you don't have a PT, somebody that you go to the gym with, the difficulty is you're going to not be able to transfer, and you may not want to do that if you are capable to do it. So why, in some cases, should you have to?
Now, with that, I see, at least here in Canada, we have a lot of focus on athletic development now with our government and what have you, in terms of trying to get individuals involved in athletic ability and developing athletic ability. And we have what we call our Own the Podium program with our Olympians and what have you. Is there a push in the UK as it relates to athletic development for both able-bodied and Paralympic athletes?
Yes, and I'm trying to think off the top of my. We had obviously one in the run up to, and see if I get this right now. In the run up to London, they were obviously, what did they call it? They had two. They had one, and I can't remember the name of it offhand. Was to get obviously tall individuals into the predominantly tall sports, and there was another one to get more women into the sport and this is able-bodied. And the Paralympic movement is always, I think there's a road show, I'm going to say every year off the top of my head. So yeah, I think in terms of recruitment, I wouldn't say we're at the forefront in terms of it, but and from the military perspective, I think we've taken the lead from the Americans with the Warrior Games and things like that, and we're trying to get our servicemen involved that way. And you can probably attest to it's probably the same in Canada.
Are there so with that? Is there any type of identification of athletes or process as it relates to that, so that you say would have the opportunity to try out? Because from your background, you've participated in a number of sports, including swimming, volleyball, and it seems that you've had the opportunity to try out a number of different things. Is there any type of formalized identification of athletes, or?
If we go more local, well, probably go closest to home for me and use Wales as the good example. I think in terms of, say, athlete development, and obviously that pathway you talk about, Anton, Disability Sport Wales, I say in terms of probably Paralympic sport, probably one of the leading nations we'll probably go out on a limb and say probably in the world in terms of getting that that pathway involved, be it, we've obviously got an academy base, and they'll look to, even if we go even further back than that, there's what they call it's a in sports series now.
Mm-hmm.
There's one in, I think it's at least one in the south, and obviously where I'm in North Wales, and then there's a national one in Cardiff every year, and I happened to go to the one last year, obviously at the same time as the Rio Paralympics, and that has gone from, I'm gonna say, going through its doors, a couple thousand over a weekend now, to probably gone exponentially, probably 20 times that amount, and that's open the eyes to both able-bodied kids to see what disability sport is at probably the grassroots, and for them to actually try it and say, well, this is what whatever sport it may be, we say athletics or wheelchair racing, this is what they have to overcome in terms of just training, getting into the sport. You don't see many disabled children obviously having access to PE, because I think this is probably a prehistoric mindset, in terms of, it's probably a little bit not of a problem now, but probably from time to time it is, in terms of the teachers, in terms of PE, kind of don't know what to do with the disabled kids, so they kind of limit probably their involvement. And whereas maybe you could ask the kid, well, what do you think your limitations are, and maybe get them to get, and they could probably, and maybe back to my experience, I think maybe the teachers they would probably give a little bit onus to me and say, well, James, what can and can't you do? And me maybe overcome these says, okay, let me try it, and if I can't do it, let me see how I can adapt it, and kind of go from that. Whereas I think maybe there is that mindset, okay, they're a disabled person, they can't do it, maybe, but then you have to have maybe that open-minded mindset and think, okay, well, let's tailor it slightly
so you do see that in the educational system, in terms of individuals dealing with disability are in a situation where they're not shown activity as readily as opposed to because of fear of hurting them or what have you, or are you seeing more of an adaptation of teachers and what have you? Because I know in Canada we struggle with sometimes having our educators feeling comfortable, especially when you're dealing with physical education and what have you. We're seeing a lot of individual programs being cut because of a lack of teachers, because of a lack of budget and that sort of thing. I'm curious to see if you're seeing something similar, and seeing kids having to go out on their own to try to find those avenues to participate in sport.
I wouldn't like to generalize in terms of saying it's a widespread thing. It may be certain teachers, maybe some are probably retired now, had that mindset, but maybe they don't know quite, and it probably maybe comes back to that, obviously, that inclusive training. It's very much a new thing in terms of, well, okay, let's say, well, it's not just physical disabilities. Obviously, you've got your mental ones and other disabilities you can't see. So it's not just, obviously the physical one's the easy one because you can see it, but it's maybe comes back to probably that onus in terms of maybe, and you probably asked a good question there. Disability sport is, I won't say a closed shop, so to speak, but it is very much, until you are actually involved in it and see how big it is, obviously being on the outside, you don't know it exists.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your physical journey as it relates to sport and what have you. Now, you started off as a swimmer, as a competitive swimmer. What drew you to swimming?
Anton, that's probably easy. That's one of the easier questions. My mum got me involved in swimming because she thought it would be, in terms of a sport I could do, I would be probably on par with my other boy peers, and it's a sport that, so to speak, you are not at a disadvantage to say if you use soccer, even say American football, where obviously speed is very much an element of the game.
So did you specialize in any particular races specifically, or?
I'm trying to think. I started butterfly probably younger than most kids would start at that time. There's obviously now it's probably changed a little bit because it was the coaches probably, well, that coach in particular saw, well, let's use my upper body strength as an advantage as opposed to, say, looking at the other strokes and obviously being somewhat, what's the word I want? Not asymmetric in terms of the flotation. Let's use that as an advantage, obviously, because I've not adapted, but the strength has come about earlier than probably some kids would, because I'm having to adapt and use my upper body probably more predominantly than I say most people would use their legs.
Yeah. And so then you made the transition later on in life in terms of volleyball to.
Well, that's towards the end. That's towards the end of my career. I had rowing in between that.
Okay. And so then, what did you participate? Because I thought I saw on your site that you also participate in rugby as well.
I did wheelchair rugby. I've stopped that now because I couldn't balance the wheelchair basketball and my job and that as well, because it was obviously a little bit more traveling, and with wheelchair basketball, it's only 4 miles down the road, and I probably enjoy basketball more than, say, rugby league.
So then with the basketball, then came the volleyball following that, and then you had the opportunity to represent Great Britain in 2 Paralympic Games.
No, the I can't speak. The basketball was more recent. The volleyball was before that.
Okay. Sounds good. Now, that being said, do you find that there was an easier transition from the volleyball to the basketball then? With that, in terms of, well, obviously wheelchair control, as well as the ability to maneuver and what have you, or in comparison to maybe another sport like the rugby or what have you?
I'd say maybe from the team aspect, yes.
Yeah.
I'd done basketball recreationally, obviously, in high school, so that probably reading the game, shooting, that came naturally. The difficulty for me was obviously the chair control, but then going on to rugby, because that was, when did I start that? It had been about 2 years ago, and I'd been now I've been playing basketball for 5 years. That was an easy transition because I've got the chair skills to go with it. But the early days of basketball, it was somewhat alien, the chair.
Yeah. Well, and is there various leagues that are available in Great Britain to participate in, or is it more community based, or is it something that you have to seek out?
No, in terms of national competitions, how many divisions we got now? About 5 divisions in the UK, and then because there's professional leagues in Europe, was it Turkey, Spain, Germany, and Italy? Obviously, our international athletes are predominantly overseas, so I think it gives the up and coming, so say the juniors coming through, gives them that high exposure to the top level we have in this country. So I think, and I've talked to other athletes, be it off air or be it on air on my show, about it. I think it's a system that maybe works for us. You could probably say, shouldn't we have our best athletes competing at home from a marketing standpoint? And then obviously it could be on television, but it's a system that seems to work when it comes to the Paralympic.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about your show, as you mentioned, the Mindset Game. Let's talk about that. And can you tell me a bit about your podcast and some of the things that you discuss on that podcast?
Well, Anton, the show is, well, at first it was a weekly show that I started, and because I wasn't releasing as many blogs more recently, I said, well, okay, if we're gonna not be publishing as much written work, let's give people an opportunity to at least get content from the guest and myself, obviously engaging, and let's make it, what's the word I want? Bi-weekly show. And obviously what I cover in the podcast itself is I look to obviously interview people from the fitness industry, nutrition, health, obviously psychology, and obviously sports. So I think in an essence, I probably brought it about because it brings probably my life to a certain extent, how I've kind of evolved throughout my probably existence in terms of going from being a young kid, interested in sports, going off to university, which I did sports science, and and towards the end of my degree, I got that passion towards sports psychology. So it's obviously that's the essence of that. And then you kind of get in relation to probably furthermore with the sport, you get my contacts with be it other athletes, be it retired or current athletes, and kind of get a perspective to see the ins and outs of adversity they may have had to overcome. You kind of make it maybe a more human kind of appreciation for their thing. I think, and there's one episode that come to mind. I interviewed one of the 100-meter sprinters, and they kind of have a bravado. It comes across on TV, and he was very much a humble guy. But I think from maybe the outset, I think people do have assumptions. Well, this person's going to be like that in real life, and I think it kind of opens your eyes and say, well, okay, this person is very much like you and I. And I get this question asked a lot in terms of, for me in particular, I'll say, we use this example now, but it's a few years old. Obviously, when I was in the Paralympic movement, have you met Oscar Pistorius? And I don't know why people put athletes on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And I personally don't like to be even included in that, because it's like, I'll put it in probably a context. It's like, well, yes, we are talented individuals to have got that far, but we are no different from anybody else. It's just that is the talent we have been given. It could be, and I think from a kid's perspective, probably listening, it's probably, if you're not sporty, obviously try and excel in your classwork.
Yeah, or find another avenue to excel in. And I see that all the time. I've had the good fortune of working with hundreds of professional athletes over the years, and running track and playing football myself, American football. And I had the good fortune years ago to run track with Donovan Bailey, former Olympian and world champion. And, it's amazing to me that how some individuals will treat either a professional athlete or a high-level athlete. Meanwhile, like you said, they put their pants on just like you and I. They do the things that you and I do, but for whatever reason, the mindset is different in terms of, oh, this individual does this, or this individual plays this sport. I think sometimes we, as a society, get wrapped up in the whole marketing side of things, the whole aspect of this individual is that much better than that other individual, but we lose focus on what's important, which is how they treat and how they carry themselves and how they treat others around them. Why I'm curious to see why you decided to call it the Mindset Set Game podcast.
Obviously, it's in terms of because it's free, and some people get confused with it. Obviously, they term it. They try. Some people say, "Oh," and I've asked guests, and they've had that assumption. Mindset is one word. No, when I mean it, and it was actually somebody, one of a good friend of mine suggested it. Obviously the mind, because it's very, especially in sport, it's the different. And obviously, you've worked with the top end guys. It's the difference between winning and losing at that level. It's that 1%. And in terms of it, it's probably using that sporting connotation with set. Obviously, you could relate it to track. And obviously, the game aspect would probably, you could refer to probably team sports. Okay.
Now, that being said, you also have your website, thefitamputee.co.uk. What's that all about? Is that more for your your PT business?
That's more, yeah, like you touched upon there, Anton. That's very much my PT business, and it was kind of, I think that one has raised some questions as well because of the name of it, and I think people have that assumption maybe it's solely for amputees, and it was more how I looked upon it was probably to have a play on words and say, well, okay, the actual fit amputee is me because of obviously my sporting background. So you could probably take it both ways. Yes, James is. And if you go delve into it and read my background, yeah, you could probably say, well, you relate. But it's very much, obviously, on the other side of it, it's probably making what is mainstream. The fitness industry probably focuses very much on the able-bodied. It's probably adapting certain aspects of that and probably getting my take on it and my experiences, be it from what I've learned from strength and conditioning coaches along the way in sport and probably day-to-day life, and probably adapting certain things and probably listening to, be it former clients, people that inquire about the site, and probably getting their take, well, and that them asking questions, well, I've got a problem with this. I can't seem to find it anywhere on the internet. And I think from my experience, be it looking at it from a visual perspective and looking at YouTube, the things you generally see related to amputees are probably they're taking their own take on how they've overcome things. But I don't, and this is probably generalization a little bit, they don't look at the obviously the technical aspects of things, be it, if we look, I think one comes to mind would be obviously the leg press. This video, the gentleman's obviously hyperextended at the knee. Okay, it may be all well and good. Yes, he's using both legs and getting use out of his prosthetic leg. However, and as you know, the long run, what damage is he doing to his good leg by obviously hyperextending at the knee and putting the extra pressure on that knee joint?
Yeah,
so it probably comes back to, yes, that information is there, but it's probably educating people. Okay, yes, do, if you can, be it if you are a below knee amputee, yes, do use that exercise to strengthen what we term probably the lesser limb, so to speak. But do look to implement technique on the limb that you've got, because you don't want to, at the end of the day, you don't want to be injuring that one and being probably more trouble down the line with your health.
What I'm curious, what would you say has been your biggest challenge as an athlete and as a coach, given the cards that you were dealt?
In terms of an athlete, and probably now because I'm retired, it's very much, and this is probably, could be taken either way in terms of, it could be turned pity, not a pity, probably like sour grapes to a certain extent. But because I've got a congenital disability, we are very much in the minority when it comes to Paralympic sport, because from the outset, we're at a disadvantage from somebody who gets an amputation later on in life, because if we probably go even further than that, if they were an ex-athlete as well, they are a fully developed individual, whereas I've got an underdeveloped glute, and there's nothing I can do about that in terms of, in certain sense, yes, I can strengthen that, but it will never be as strong as, say, my able-bodied side. So I think you're always going to be on the back foot. I won't use that as, say, that was a limitation as to why I retired, but you are always going to be probably on a back foot in terms of that. But I never looked at, when I was actually doing the actual sport, I probably use that as a motivator. Okay, I'm gonna try and it's not really overcome adversity, but this is an extra hurdle I'm gonna have to come. Be it, I think, if I use rowing as the example in terms of adversity, and I used our programming as the example, they very much wanted to follow the able-bodied model, be it get the biggest say the tallest and the biggest person they can into the boat. So we're talking obviously over 6 foot,
Mm-hmm.
and what would it be? Or metric, about over 100 kilos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And nobody could nobody could ever live with me on the water. So okay, in testing on the rowing machine,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't the best, but I think, and this is, and then probably emphasis of rowing, you don't win a race on land. So when it comes to championship, and I think even in the weight room, they might be 100 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to what testing we do say 1 rep max,
Mm-hmm.
we were doing the same weight, and I'm only 70 kilos. Okay, so if you put that into the boat, I'm now 30 kilos stronger than you. So that makes a massive difference. So I think I probably use that as a massive motivator. Okay, you want these, so to speak, juggernauts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if you can't shift your own body weight, there's a problem, because with we use my probably classification in particular, it was a double. So if you can't shift your body weight and you've got somebody else as well, so it's, I think, I don't know, you probably could put it down to genetics that I was able to be able to move that weight. It was very much, it's nice to be able to put it in reflection to people and say, well, you don't have to be the biggest, you don't have to be the strongest. Probably find a way, and we touched upon it, that you could get the best out of you. You don't have to always be like everybody else. It's trying to find, I wouldn't say it's a strength even, it's probably trying to find those little 1% that make you, try and be it, probably from an able perspective, probably pace, agility, and it's trying to develop those skills to try and make you stand out. So, and I've kind of cut the story there.
Yeah.
I was never beaten on the water, and I'd always been put against these people. And I think that we had one trial in particular, and they kept pushing it back. And it's like, oh, we're not going to have the final trial for, I think it was World Champs that year. And it probably, I'm quite laid back individual, but for that one particular moment in my career, and it's probably quite hilarious, and from how I look at it, it annoyed me. It kind of touched the nerve. It's like, well, why do you keep moving the goalposts? So I went about, and we had a performance director there as well. Okay, I'm going to put out a statement and prove a point that you can't live with me. And we had to rerun the first race because he capsized. We run the second round again. I actually got a better start on the second run, and then they beaten him by, what was it, about over 30 seconds. And obviously that's not, they said, oh, we're going to still do trials. I think it was a month later. It's like, there's the evidence. That doesn't matter how much training you're going to do.
You're not going to make up 30 seconds. Yeah.
So when we did the final trial, I think it was about a month, 2 months down the line, the weather was not the greatest. It's like, well, I'm going to respect the individual because it's not his fault that they did that. I'm just going to beat him. And we were probably good friends from the beginning anyway, because it's like, well, there's no point being rivals out of competition always. I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but for me, I can be friends with somebody outside that competitive environment. But then when it comes to obviously game time, whatever time to go, you obviously the adversary. So I beat him by, I think it was, I don't know, 5 seconds. It's like, well, I'm not going to humiliate you, because there's no point in doing that, because you, as he probably knew, it doesn't matter how much training you do in 2 months, 30 seconds is pretty hard to come back from. So it's like, well, it's not your fault that they decided to prolong the situation. Probably it's a humble win, so to speak, and probably just beat you. Some might say it's probably gracious in victory, because it's like, well, I probably was used to conditions like that, so I was like, well, I'll beat you off the start, and that's it. And rowing's very much, once you're in front, you can probably you can kind of dictate, because you can see you can obviously see your opponent, whereas they're very much second guessing everything you do. So if you say put in a sprint, well, I can see it and I can react, whereas you're trying to guess what I'm going to do. So it's very much, and the coaches in the past have said, oh, it was that kind of team philosophy. You need to get out and stay out, which
Yeah.
I didn't always agree with, because if you row through somebody from a mental perspective, and they've done everything they can to keep you behind them, or the way around, sorry, keep you on the back foot, and you do that to a crew mentally, it's probably mind shattering, because you're thinking, well, I've thrown the kitchen sink at you,
And you're still going.
and you're still going. And I probably use another example in terms of that happened. What would that mean? In 2009 at World Cup, we had an awful start. Caught a crab, so obviously the blade got caught in the water, virtually not say spun. It's probably spun the boat around 90 degrees, so not even going in a straight line. And I kind of had, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds of doubt. It's like, well, today is over. We're going to finish last. And I don't know what it was. It's like, well, okay, let's give it a chance. And I think, what was it? Within 150 to about 200 meters, we were in the front. And our, what was it? The team manager of the squad said that's the fastest she's seen an international crew do that to a field. And I think we won quite comfortably. And thinking, okay, if that hadn't happened at the start, how badly would we have beaten the field? But it's kind of maybe never doubting yourself that you can. I think it's very probably human nature to think, well, if something goes wrong, it's like, oh, let's maybe not try. It's like, what? It's everything's probably gone. So it's maybe, I think maybe in that essence, you've got nothing to lose. Like, well, we're dead and buried, so to speak. See what happens. I never thought that would happen. You're thinking, okay, we're last.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're first place. And I probably used that analogy earlier. What that would have done to the rest of the field mentally.
Yeah, it would have been over. It would have been over for them. Yeah. What's your biggest challenge as a PT? Working with clients, both able-bodied as well as with disability.
It probably, I think for me personally, and this is no gripe towards the company that I used to work for, is probably maybe, and this is maybe the company at large, they don't use probably the hand they dealt with. I wasn't the only athlete they had at that particular gym in terms of high level, but they never actually went about it in a good way to market us, to maybe get one up on the gyms around. So you're thinking maybe, you would say maybe that's a bit stupid, because it's like, well, that would maybe entice future members to come and sign up, and maybe entice people to stay within that one over the other ones. But in terms of maybe adversity I faced, I don't know, and this is maybe an assumption here, maybe people can't relate with somebody with a disability, be it maybe from that bodybuilding culture that's, you could say they're looking for perfection, whereas maybe they can't resonate in terms of somebody with a missing limb, albeit I'm using only me as an example, but you could say even PTs who've got spinal injuries, wheelchair users and things like that, they can't maybe get on a level footing in terms of that, obviously that mindset, or well, how, if you're in a wheelchair, have a disability, how can you train me? But maybe you should have the reverse psychology of saying, well, I could maybe look at your weaknesses and say, well, have you looked at maybe improving your balance and things like that, and outside the box, which with balance, when I haven't done it for long periods of time, even I struggle, and I'm used to being on one leg, I'd say maybe 25% of the time, whereas with an able-bodied person, unless you work on it, That's going to be a massive weakness. Okay, some people from bodybuilding perspective won't do it, but you do find, obviously, when you're working on, I'll use the example now, probably predominantly working on single body movements, that one is, I would have an advantage, because if we use the squat, and I won't generalize and say every amputee will squat without their prosthetic leg, but I do. So one-legged squat for me, I won't say it's not difficult, but it is
less difficult.
It's a less effort in terms of balance, because I've got probably that motor connection with my body. I know how it's going to react in terms of, I've got, be it a barbell on my back, dumbbells in my arm. I can adjust to that balance issue. Whereas you give somebody, we'll say, Bulgarian split squat, the first instance they have is balance, because it's, I'm outside my comfort zone here. And it's very much maybe getting them to focus on maybe less so the weight at the beginning, and maybe look at focusing, let's get you going in asymmetry, up, down. You're not going side to side, and you are thus utilizing your body probably more so than you would do in a normal squat, because obviously you're having to engage your core a lot more.
Well, James, let's finish up, but I'd like to ask you if you have a message for our listeners, both our athletes and our general PT clients. If you have a message for them,
I'd say always think outside the box, because it's never an untapped resource out there. Try to adapt it from, if we look at the PT things, try to think outside the box, because I kind of use this analogy. It doesn't matter if the client's able-bodied or disabled. If you kind of look at it from an able-bodied perspective, you're not going to always give people off-the-shelf kind of material. You're not going to give everybody the same kind of program. So it's probably looking at it from that one, giving a disabled individual that kind of thing, and probably looking at them that way is probably the right way to go about it, because they're no different. Okay, they do have an impairment, but it's treating them equally as you would do, be it somebody wants to do weight loss as opposed to strength gain. They're two different entities, and it's probably looking at that and looking at maybe throwing the disability out the window a little bit, and maybe looking at, well, this is their goal, and probably segmenting them in either or category, and then probably adapting it from there, and very much having that dialogue as you would do with any client, probably listening, well, does this work? Does this not work? And kind of going from there. And probably to all your listeners, it's a way of life. It's adapting. It's looking at how things you can improve.
Well, James Roberts, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be on our podcast, and I'd love to have you back for sure to get your insight on different things as it comes up.
It was my pleasure, Anton. Thanks for the invite, and once again, it was my pleasure for coming on your show.
Thank you, sir.